Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Manny here once again. Welcome back to another WNBA lineup advice video for you guys here at DFS Zone. And before I get started, man, I appreciate it. Really greatly appreciate you guys drop a like on the video. And if you have not, as of yet, subscribed to this channel, please do so down below. And do not forget, most importantly, to put on your notifications so this way you do not miss any of my new uploads or live shows. With that being said, it is Sunday, August the 26th, 2018. Two-game slate today in the WNBA. We are now down to the final four, best of five series among Washington and Atlanta, and Phoenix versus Seattle. And before I get started with the actual slate, just very, very tired. It's 3:15 in the morning, New York time. I made a sacrifice. I know these games start at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And before I go over the slate, just want to let you know, I'm going to sound a little bit tired, and I am. I was out, and I came back, and I said I have to get this done before I go to bed. Just a reminder, two-game slate. All players are obviously in play. I'm going to basically narrow it down because I am tired, and I decided that I'm not going to be able to do a live show tomorrow. I have some family events that I got to go and do, and it's going to take me most of the day. So I'm just going to try to get some sleep, get up, and go and do what I have to do. So it's another long day tomorrow, which I totally forgot about. So again, no live show tomorrow. So I'm going to basically give you the best possible plays that I believe they are for tomorrow. For today, because it's already 3 in the morning, for today's slate. This way you have something to really break down. Just keep in mind that all players are obviously in play. It's a two-game slate. This is not an elimination game, so there could be some more variable opportunities with players off the bench. So keep that in mind. But obviously the star and the stud players on each team in this particular slate, they're gonna all get significant amount of time. All right, it's not so much so when there's an elimination, considering that these teams have a 5-game series to work with here. But again, you want to definitely narrow down 3 or 4 core players, and you want them to be starters and possibly stud plays. There is room here in these 4 games to be able to get some decent lineups in, and I do recommend that you make multiple lineups. There's no doubt about it. And I also believe that both games are stackable games. So you could game stack the Washington-Atlanta game with 5 players from that game. I think there's sufficient room in there to do that. You may even get 6 out of there that are possible viable plays. And you might be able to do the same in the Phoenix-Seattle game. The Phoenix-Seattle game is going to be all these 4 games, 4 teams are a little bit paced up teams, but Phoenix and Seattle is going to probably be the more, at least Vegas has them with the bigger lines. So expect that one to be more action-packed and more offense there than Washington-Atlanta. But a Washington-Atlanta could be another shootout as well. So all 4 teams like to have that kind of quick-paced game up and down the floor. So definitely keep that into consideration when you're making the lineup. So again, just going to go over the players that I think are the best plays for you guys. It's probably going to be only about 16 or 17 players total, or maybe less. But there are going to be some that I'm going to mention that I think are definitely viable plays. You're just going to have to do your due diligence and check them out a little bit further. All right, so the Washington-Atlanta game. Oh, and before I go any further also, I did set up another 20-player pool, another 20-player Fanduel tournament here. I'm going to leave the link in the description. I just checked it now before coming on and doing the video, and I noticed only 5 or 6 people, I think it was 5 players, and that's including me as one of them, have only signed up for it. There is still room for 15 more players. I'll give it one more shot. Obviously, I'm going to leave it in the link. If we don't fill up, if that tournament doesn't fill out, obviously FanDuel is going to move it just like the other night. It's going to make the game into a free game, so everybody's going to be reimbursed. It's a $2 entry fee, and the top 3 players cash. That's it, plain and simple. It's not that difficult. I felt this was a good way for us to interact as a community and keep the community going. But it seems like I'm not getting 20 people to get in there and want to play. So I know maybe some of you guys play a lot of DraftKings maybe. But nonetheless, whatever the case may be, the link will be in the description box below. If you are interested in any way, just go right to the link, sign up for it. Let's see if we can get those last 15 people, so we got to at least do the first DFS Zones FanDuel tournament. Only 20 players though. If not, then maybe I just don't bother doing it. I don't want to go crazy. All right. So let's get right into the slate, man, because I am ready to go to bed. So we got Washington at Atlanta. All right, implied totals are 160.5 with Washington at the current moment, as I checked earlier, are favored by one going into Atlanta. Washington is coming in here, man. They have won 9 of their last 10 games. They've been playing spectacular basketball, which I mentioned the last time out. Atlanta, the same. They're over the course of the last 6, 7, 8 games. They're like 5-1, 6-1. So they've been playing very well as well. They have played each other 3 times this year, and I think all 3 games were won. I believe all 3 games. Well, 2 out of the 3 games were won by Atlanta. All right, so Washington has won 1 and Atlanta has won 2. In those 3 games, Atlanta was able to put up 47.6 points per game in the front court against Washington and 37 points in the back court. In the 3 games, Washington was able to put up 54.3 points in the front court per game and the back court 28.3. So automatically out of the 3 games, that I conclude out of that we could target the front court for Washington against Atlanta, and we can actually target Atlanta's backcourt against Washington. Okay, so I mean, and I believe that's a good way to go. I think that I definitely like Atlanta's backcourt in this particular matchup against Washington. In the last 3 games, which I always try to give you guys both things. In the last 3 games, Washington has been giving up 47.3 points per game to the forwards and centers and 25.3 points per game to the backcourt, which are actually not that bad. The backcourt has actually done better over the course of the last 3 games as opposed to the 3 games they had against Atlanta. And then Atlanta has given up 51.6 points per game over the course of the last 3 games they played to forwards and centers and 34 points per game to guards. Which both numbers are slightly higher or quite a bit higher than Washington. So Washington has played better in the last 3 games. And then against one another, we have seen that Washington definitely has an advantage, at least in the 3 games they have played, that they have put up more points in the front court than in the back court. When I look at the actual players in this matchup, man, I really, to be totally honest with you, I really like the Atlanta backcourt over Washington. As much as I like Kristi Toliver, who's very, very tough, could be very challenging. She doesn't have a lot of upside, neither does Tiffany Hayes, but I think I like Tiffany Hayes a little bit better here than Toliver. I'm willing to fade Toliver, and the reasons I'm fading Toliver is more so that I like where Atlanta has in their backcourt, where they have the runner slasher type, very, very aggressive girls that are willing to drive to the basket in like Brittany Sykes and most importantly Sykes and Tiffany Hayes. Hayes and Sykes, they love being very aggressive. They challenge players and guards, and they really go into the basket and really drive hard. And that style of play against Washington is very, very good, and it gives Atlanta an advantage because they are quicker there and they're more athletic there as far as Hayes and Sykes. And then I like the fact that they have Montgomery and Bentley that come in and play, and they have a different way of playing guard. They're more of the guards that shoot from the perimeter, look for the 3-point shots, and they like to facilitate, especially Bentley, who's willing to pass the ball as opposed to Montgomery. And they both have slightly good upside, Montgomery having the best upside. So in this matchup here, I kind of like the Atlanta guards over Washington's guards, and it's just simply because of that. I just like their style of play, and I like what they get out of each individual player that makes it more challenging for Washington. So that's what I'm looking at here, and this is just me as a pure observer of just watching them play. But I kind of like that style better. So going in, I normally like Washington in their backcourt because they got good 3-point shooters and all. In this particular matchup and in this series, I think if Atlanta's backcourt can neutralize Kristi Toliver, which they've been able to do in their matchups. Kristi Toliver, I'm fading her also because she has not performed well against Atlanta. You know, she has had against Atlanta, she's only shot 37% from the floor and 22% from 3, only averaging about 20 fantasy points per game, which is 5 or 6 points below her average. So I'm willing to fade Toliver. I like Hayes. I like Brittany Sykes as well. When it comes to Tiffany Hayes, you're looking at 3,000, 7K. You're looking at 35 you need from her. She's averaging 28. 3 out of her last 4 games, she's been basically at around her range, her average, which is about 30 plus. Her games against Washington, she put up 29 in 28 minutes, pretty much 1 fantasy point per minute. And then she put up a 17 in game 2 in 27 minutes and 31 in game 1 in 32 minutes. So her numbers have looked pretty good. She's, against Washington as opposed to Ms. Tolliver. So I kind of like Tiffany Hayes. She's definitely someone you can consider today. I like also Sykes because of the style of play, which I mentioned before. And Tiffany Sykes, 6,200. You pretty much need 31. She's averaging 19. That number obviously is very, very high for her here on FanDuel. But numbers versus Washington have been pretty good. She's had a 31 spot in 22 minutes in the last game, 25 in 20 minutes in game 2, and played 14 minutes in game 1 only. Didn't put a whole lot of points up, but she was effective in game 2 and 3, like I said, with 31 and 25 respectively in less than 22 minutes both games. So she was, definitely over 1 fantasy point per minute in those 2 games. Her numbers on the road are better than at home. She's averaging 39% field goal percentage and 24% from 3. That is where she's not selling me at. She's selling me at where I think that the matchup is best for her because she is willing to drive and penetrate and be aggressive. If she does that, she'll do fine. Against Washington, her numbers are not shooting-wise have not been that great, even though she put up 31 and 25 in 2 respective games. She is only averaging 37% field goal percentage, but 37% from 3, doing very, very well there, averaging also about 5 rebounds per game as well, and at about 19-20 fantasy points, which is about average for her. But she has the potential to give you, almost 30. So that's another thing you can look at. She can get you, 6-7x. All right, so Ms. Sykes is someone to consider here at 6,200. Even cheaper than that, you can go $200 cheaper and maybe even grab an Alex Bentley. I don't think I have no problem with Bentley. 6 out of the last 8 games, she's been at 22 plus, which is above her average. She has smashed her average here, 35 and 21 in 2 straight. Okay, she's also been averaging in the last 8 games, as you can see here, all the way down to about here before the last Washington game, where she only put 1 fantasy point. She has since then played 21 minutes or better pretty much on average since then. So she's been more of an integral part of the offense, coming off the bench, facilitating and actually scoring and looking for a shot at 3 and so on and so forth. So she is doing a lot better. Definitely think she is someone to consider here, averaging almost 22 fantasy points per game versus Washington in 3 games after she had this one dismal game here. As you can see, she put 15 here and 8, and then 11 here and 12, more than 1 fantasy point per minute. So not an enormous amount of minutes, but as you can see, that's why I pointed out in the last 7-8 games, she's been basically playing a lot more minutes. So she's someone to consider. Obviously, the best option here is Renee Montgomery. I'm not on Ariel Atkins. Her numbers have been really, really bad against against Atlanta. 39% shooting from the floor and 27% from 3. Actually 36 and 20 against Atlanta, and on the road she is not very good on the road either. 38% from the floor and 27% from 3. So Ariel Atkins at 5,900, I'm definitely going to bypass her. Like I said, I kind of like the Atlanta players, so I'm going to stick with Renee Montgomery at 5,700. I kind of like her there as well. You need pretty much like 28 to cover that, and she's averaging 20, a little bit above her price. I mean, we'll look to see if she's in that area. She has had 2 45-plus games in the last 3. So we know she's capable of getting 40, and that's what we like. That's what I like best about her, is that she could explode at any moment for 45 or 30 or 35, but she could also have those dull games where she only puts up 10 or 15 like she did here. 15 and 19 here in 21, 23 minutes. I think she's going to get still maximum minutes. I'll say anywhere between 25 and 30, and I would not be surprised if she's shooting well, she gets more than 30 minutes. All right, but last 3 games, 38% field goal percentage, 44% from 3. She's also averaging 5 assists and 2.5 steals per game during that stretch of the 3 games, averaging 30 points per game, which this breaks down to that with that 12.9 dud game against Phoenix. All right, versus Washington, she's shooting 37% from the floor and 38% from 3, averaging about 23 fantasy points per game. She had a 31 spot here in 19 minutes. 24 in 24 minutes, she put up an 8 spot, and in 28 minutes here, she had a 40 spot, one of the biggest games of the year she had against Washington. So Renee Montgomery is someone definitely you can consider. I definitely like her there. in this matchup tomorrow. Other than that, you could also take a stab at Natasha Cloud. I like Natasha Cloud here at 5,600. You need about 28. She's averaging 20. 5 of her last 7 games, as you can see here. She's had at least 19 plus, which is pretty much her average or better. Versus Atlanta, she put up a 15.6 here. All right, and then she had a 26. She had a 9 spot here in 30 minutes, and then she put 26 here, pretty much 25.8, pretty much 26 in 26 minutes, more 1 fantasy point per minute. Away, she's not a bad shooter. Away, 42% on the road from the floor and 41% from 3. Also averaging 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and 19 to as much as 19.5, almost 20 fantasy points per game. Versus Atlanta, her percentage is even better. 46% shooting from the floor, 60% from 3, averaging 3 rebounds per game and 3 assists a game, and putting up about 19.5 fantasy points per game during the stretch of those 3 games. So Natasha Cloud is someone to consider here as well at 5,600. So I like Cloud for Washington, and basically she's the only guard I like for Washington. And then I say definitely Hayes, Sykes, Bentley, and Montgomery are all in play, and I would say Hayes and maybe Montgomery are my favorite plays. Okay, but as far as there, at the bottom tier here, the best play here is Monique Curry. All right, Miss Curry here at 3,600. You need 15. She's averaging pretty much 12. That's only 3 points less. If she can get the minutes, all right, she'll be all right. She put here 6 and 8.5 and 8.9 in 6 minutes against Atlanta. The time before that, she put up 23 and 15, and she put up a 6 spot in 9 minutes. So she didn't get 2 games out of the 3. She didn't get sufficient minutes. In the game that she did get a little bit more, she put more than 1 fantasy point per minute. And on top of that, granted she didn't play, only played 3 minutes here against LA. She didn't need to play much because they just dominated. They dominated in that game. They really didn't need Monique Curry that much. So 17, 19, and 27 in those previous 3 games. So the minutes are there. If she can get 17 to as much as 20 or 25 minutes, she has the capabilities of getting you 20, but she definitely can get you value if she gets the minutes. So I think Monique Curry is someone you can consider. She's good away also. Her road splits are very, very good. 44% from the floor, 33% from 3, 80% free throw percentage, and averaging about close to 15 fantasy points per game on the road. And versus Atlanta, her numbers have been spectacular. As you can see here, very small sample in the minutes that she played, but she was efficient. 54% field goal percentage, 67% from 3, 100% from the free throw line. There was only 2 shots. She hit both of them, and a small sample of the 3-pointers as well. Only 3 3-point shots, and she hit 2 of them, but averaging about 14 fantasy points per game in those games against Atlanta. So I definitely like Miss Curry. We go to the forwards. Obviously, Delle Donne is in play. We know that. Elena Delle Donne, 8,300. Need about 41, 42. She's averaging 39. She's had pretty much, it looks like about 36 plus in maybe 6 out of the last 7 games. Numbers have been good. 39 plus in 5 out of the 7 pretty much. Versus Atlanta, pretty solid. Not too bad. She had a 56 spot here in the last game in 36 minutes at Atlanta. The prior game before that, she put up a 48 in 35 minutes, and then the game before that, 31 in 28 minutes. So she's had, 3 electrifying games against Atlanta. I don't see no reason. I mean, there's nothing more I need to look at. But then if you want to go any further, I looked into her field goal percentage over the last 3 games. She's averaging 41% from the floor and 33% from 3. Also 86% from the free throw line with an 8.5 rebounds a game average, and 3 assists and 1 steal on average over the last 3 games. 37 fantasy points per game, just really 1 or 2 fantasy points less than average over the course of the last 3 games. But the numbers have been really solid against Atlanta. 51% and 43% from 3. Versus Atlanta, so-so a little bit with the numbers, but 39%, nearly 40% from the floor, and 36% from 3. But she is averaging 12 rebounds per game in those games against Atlanta, 1.5 blocks, and 1 steal, and 46 to almost 47, 46.5 fantasy points per game. against Atlanta. That's 8 points, almost 9 points above her average. So she's done well there. So I think she's definitely someone you can definitely consider for this actual slate. Miss Sanders is another one, 7,500. You need about 37. She's averaging 26. Okay, 7 out of our last 8 games, as you can see here. Very, very nice. 27 or better. So she is smashing at least above her average. 3 out of the last 3 games here, pretty much she's hit 40 or better. So you know she can at least get you 40. Versus Atlanta, she put up a 28 right here. Pretty much 27.7 is 28. She had a 30 spot in 32 minutes in the second game and 11 in 16 minutes in the first game. All right. The last 3 games, she's averaging 43% from the floor, 100% from the free throw line with 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, and 2 steals. So the numbers have just been great. You know, I mean, it's not even any more that I need to say. Latoya Sanders is definitely someone you can consider as well for tomorrow, for today, excuse me. Then we come over to Atlanta. Obviously, Ms. Breland and Ms. Williams are both in play, but I like Ms. Breland the best. So I'm not going to speak about Ms. Elizabeth Williams, but she is someone in play. Definitely take a look at her if you must. She's about $500 cheaper. But Breland, I kind of like Breland here. She's going to get pumped up. No Angel McCoughtry is a big, big loss for Atlanta, but Breland's going to have to step up here. 7,400. You need about 37. She's averaging 28. 6 out of her last 8 games, she's at 31 plus. That's above her average, which I always look for first. Okay. Versus Washington, only a 16 spot in 24 minutes in the last game. As you can see right here, not a very good game, only 2 points. But the game before that, she put up a 33 in 26 minutes, and in game 1, she put up 56 in 32 minutes. So she has the capability of giving you 50 against this team. I say more like 40 or better. All right, her splits are better on the road than at home, but at home, not too bad. 41% from the floor, 75% from the free throw line, averaging 8.5 rebounds and 2 blocks with 1.5 steals per game, and averaging almost 28 fantasy points per game, which is pretty much her average. Versus Washington, she's shooting 44% and 80% from the free throw line, 8 rebounds per game, 3 blocks per game, and averaging 33.5 fantasy points per game, which is 7.5 fantasy points, 5.5 fantasy points above her average. As you can see, she's at 28. So she's done very well against this team, and I think she's definitely someone to consider here for sure as well. Elizabeth Williams is another one, but I am definitely going to go with Breland as opposed to her. Aerial Powers is someone to consider here also in the bottom tier here, 4,400. Miss Powers could be a very, very surprising play. 4,400. You need about 22 from her. She's averaging 12, so that number, obviously, that 4,400 is pretty high. But they do know, not pretty high, but they know that she's capable of getting there because she's gotten 22 here and 24. All right. 4 out of her last 5 games, she's averaging at least 12 or better, which is above her average, which is something that's important. You definitely want to see them at least above their average. 15 spot in 18 minutes against this team the last time out. There goes 15 and 18. And that was the only game that she played as a Washington Mystic, okay, before she came over from Dallas. So she's only played against Atlanta once as a Mystic, and she put up a fairly decent outing, 10.6 rebounds. So I went with that, and then I went to see how well she's done over the last few games. So in the last 3 games, she's averaging 46% field goal percentage and 33% from 3, with 4 rebounds, 16 fantasy points per game, and that's 4 points above her average. So that leads me to go on to the next thing. And the next thing for me is to see how well she's done on the road and her home and away splits. 44% field goal percentage, 50% from 3 away, and 100% from the free throw line, only 4 out of 4. 13 fantasy points per game on the road. Then I go on and I see, let me check to see how she's done in that one game shooting against Atlanta. In that one game, she shot 50% from the floor and 100% from 3. She took only 2 shots from 3, but she buried them both. And 3 of 6 from the floor. 18 fantasy points. So that leads me to believe that she could possibly be a very nice play here. So definitely keep Aerial Powers as a consideration. Miss Hawk is in consideration as well. T-Hawk, I'm not gonna go over her, but she's someone also to consider. She's $400 cheaper, and also consider maybe Miss Monique Billings for Atlanta. Miss Billings' numbers are not too bad. I'll go over her numbers real quick. 4,100. You need about 20. She's averaging 8, but she's had some good moments. I mean, 17 spot in game 2, right here. She put 14 points in 17 minutes. Over here, she put 17 in 13 minutes. So she's doing fine. She's almost at 1 fantasy point per minute average in the last 2 games against this team. If she can get 15 to 20 minutes, she's capable of getting you value. I think she can get you 20. All right. Home and away splits are not too bad either. At home, 44% from the floor, 72% free throw percentage, averaging about 9 fantasy points per game. But versus Washington, that even intrigued me even more. In those 2 games against Washington, 53% field goal percentage and 60% free throw. But I'm more impressed with the 53% field goal percentage and the fact that she was averaging 12 fantasy points per game, which is 4 points above her average. So Monique Billings at 2,100 could possibly be a play. At 4,100 could be possibly a play. I think Ariel Powers is even a better play. All right, we go over to Phoenix and Seattle. Phoenix and Seattle, I got implied totals of 170.5 with Seattle favored by 6.5 at home. These teams come in here, they're kind of red hot. I mean, Seattle, 8 out of their last 10 games, 5 out of their last 6. They're 5-1 in their last 6 games. Phoenix has won 6 straight games, won 2 playoff games, 2 elimination games already. They have played each other 3 times, but Seattle has won all 3 games. So Phoenix is coming in red hot, playing the best basketball they have played. Their star players in Bonner, Griner, and Taurasi have been absolutely just lights out. I am not gonna go against those girls just yet until they lose a game and they look bad. At this moment, you got to ride the wave here, man. Bonner has been red hot. You got to continue to play Miss Bonner. That's just the way I look at it. So when we look at the 3 games they have played against each other, Phoenix put up on Seattle 50 points per game in the front court and 32.3 points per game in the back court. Seattle put up on Phoenix 52 points in the front court per game and 38.6 points per game in the back court. So what I like is that we could target Seattle backcourt players against Phoenix and vice versa. I think in the front court, same thing. We can attack either way. So this game here is going to be a fairly good matchup. Both high-scoring teams, both pace teams. I kind of like, the whole idea of Taurasi and Jewel Lloyd going at it. And obviously, Taurasi is just, she's capable of putting 45, 50 easy every single night. Jewel Lloyd is not capable of actually hitting those kind of numbers that consistently. But I think this matchup is going to be pretty cool. I think it's going to be something definitely to watch. And it's going to be entertaining. Over the course of the last 3 games, Seattle has given up 55.3 points per game to the front court. That's actually 3 more than what they've been giving up. I'm talking about Phoenix here, has been given up to Seattle, and 30.6 points per game to the backcourt. That's what Phoenix has given up. Seattle in the last 3 games has actually been better defending in the front court, 46.7 points per game to the forwards and centers, and only given up 29.5 in the backcourt. But it's going to be tough for them to slow down Miss Taurasi, who's going to just like an energized bunny. So I can see this game getting a little out of hand as far as, being a really high-scoring game, really, really fast-paced. It's going to favor Phoenix as well in some areas. Seattle, I kind of like Seattle's front court with Natasha Howard and Brianna Stewart. Very long, very athletic, very lean girls, as opposed to in the front court for Phoenix, you got Griner, and of course you got Talbert and Bonner. Bonner obviously is just hands down, she's just a stud, the way she's playing right now. But, let's go over the game. We have DeWanna Bonner, like I said, 8,000. You need 40. She's hands down in play for me until somebody stops her. I'm going to keep playing her. She's going to be one of my core players once again. So DeWanna Bonner is definitely in play, averaging 22 to 26 minutes pretty much over the last she's put up 30 and 34 minutes in game 2 and 31 and 35 minutes in game 1 against this team. She only put up a 22 in 26 minutes, excuse me, in the last game, which was a dud game for her. But 5 straight games at 47 plus. I mean, she's she's just been crazy, man. Look at these numbers. I mean, you can't stop her, man. I apologize. I am crazy tired, but you can't stop this lady, man. She has been just literally on fire. So Bonner is definitely in play, man. 30 and 34. In the last 3 games, she's averaging 51% field goal percentage and 39% from 3, 88% from the free throw line. I mean, it's crazy. Her home and away splits have been pretty good as well. 47% on the road shooting from the floor, 34% from 3, averaging about 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal per game. Versus Seattle, she's averaging only 38% field goal percentage, which is kind of low, 15% from 3, which is really dreadful. But one thing to point out here, these teams played 3 times this year. The first 2 games were very early in the year. They were like May the 20th and May 23rd. It was literally Phoenix's second and third game of the year. This team is not the same team that you saw back in the first week of the season, week and a half of the season. So I'm letting you know right now, I mean, it's a totally different story. So I'm not buying completely into these numbers, seeing her only shooting 38 and 15, especially when those games were played that far back. So I'm going to go with what I've seen from her as of late and what the team has done as a whole over the course of the last few games. So with that, DeWanna Bonner for me is definitely someone that's in play. All right. We got next to Miss Diana Taurasi. Obviously, Taurasi's in play. You can't go wrong with either one of the 2 girls. I'm just favoring DeWanna Bonner. She's just been really, really steady. So I mean, either one you cannot go wrong. But I'm favoring DeWanna Bonner in play here. Sue Bird and Jewel Lloyd are both in play. I really like Jewel Lloyd in this game. I mean, this price is really, really cheap. $6,700 with a possible 40-point upside or better. Jewel Lloyd is a steal here, if anything, to me at $6,700. Her numbers haven't looked good, and that's probably the reason why her price is that low. But she has too much upside. She's capable of getting you 40 or better, and she even could get you 50. She's shown that throughout some times during the course of this year. So for me, I mean, she hasn't had big numbers as of late, but hey, I mean, 40-point upside, you can't go wrong. And she's actually played well against Phoenix. Against Phoenix, as you can see here, last game out, 46, almost a 47 spot in 28 minutes. The game before that, which you're not going to find here, I'm going to have to share it with you over here as we go over to Jewel Lloyd. And they go all the way, I went too far, right over here. The 20th and the 23rd, she put a 40 spot on the second game of the season, and in game 1, 26. So she's put up very, very good numbers against. She put up about 110, 111 fantasy points against this team in 3 games. She shoots better on the road. Okay, 38%. You know, she shoots better on the road. Her home and away splits are not the greatest, but she is still shooting 38% from the field at home and 36% from 3. 80% from the free throw line, averaging 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1.5 steals per game, and nearly 29 fantasy points per game, which is above her average, slightly, pretty much. Versus Phoenix, she's shooting 51% from the floor and 60% from 3, 93% from the free throw line. So she definitely gets up for these games, averaging 1.5 steals a game and 38 fantasy points per game, which puts her at about 9 fantasy points above her average. So, I mean, I definitely think she could be a possibly big steal tomorrow. If she can get you 40, she can get you 8 or 9x at that price. That's going to be fantastic. So I definitely love Bonner and Jewel Lloyd here in this matchup. Not on Talbot or January or Canada. I think you could take a little peek maybe at Wycombe. All right, she's had some moments where she's played a little bit. She needs minutes, though. If she gets a few minutes more than she normally gets at 3,800, you need pretty much 17, 18. This was obviously a game that they didn't need anybody on the floor, so she got garbage time in a game that was not important for them against Dallas. But she's had 15 spots in 16, 17 minutes, nearly 1 fantasy point per minute when she has played. If she could play more than 4 or 5 minutes, she can get these kind of minutes here. She'll be all right. Against Phoenix, as you can see here, she put up 5 in 10 minutes. All right. She in the 2 games against Phoenix, she shot fairly well, 43% from the floor and 60% from three. Very small sample, 3 of 7 from the floor and 3 of 5 from three, but nonetheless very effective. So Mrs. Whitecomb could possibly get some time. I'm not on Turner or anybody else. I think that's pretty much it for me there. When it comes to forwards, it's not going to be that difficult. Obviously, Brittany Griner is in play, and she's the only one, obviously, out of the girls from Phoenix that are here. Because remember, Bonner and Talbert are guards here on FanDuel in the guard side, but they basically are the 3 and 4 for Phoenix. So we already covered them. But Griner is in play, 8,600. She's had pretty good numbers against this team. She has 50-point upside. You need about 43 from her. She's averaging 40, so slightly a little above her price, of her average. But she can do 50 or better. As you can see here, she put 71 here against Atlanta. So, I mean, she has tremendous numbers. 5 out of her last 7 games at 34 plus, which is not too bad. It's slightly below her average, but as you can see, these numbers have risen 51, 71, 56, 52 over here as well. So she has been very, very good. And then on top of that, versus Seattle, she's done very well as well. Versus Seattle here, as you can see, 30 minutes, 53.7 fantasy points there. And I don't have the other numbers here unless I share them with you over here, but she put up 31 in Game 2 in 34 minutes and 54 in Game 1 in 36 minutes. All right, those are very big numbers. 2 50-pointers against this team this season. Granted, Game 1 and 2 were at the very first week and a half of the WNBA season. So remember, as much as she looked explosive, but again, she did put up a 53 spot not so long ago, as you can see here. That was back on July the 31st. So she is capable of doing well against this team. In the last 3 games, not against this team, but just against in general against opposition, 63% field goal percentage, 67% from the free throw line. Not that good off the free throw line, but she did average 8 rebounds per game over that stretch and 4 blocks per game, putting up 43 fantasy points per game, which is 3 above her average. Her splits, her home and away splits are not bad at all, especially away. 55% from the floor and 80% from the free throw line. That's way better free throw shooting away than in the last 3 games. 7 rebounds, 3 blocks per game, and 40 fantasy points per game, which is still slightly above her average. And then against Seattle, I look at the third thing. And now against Seattle, 56% field goal percentage, which is even higher than her away splits. 78% free throw percentage, which is not too bad. 6.5 rebounds, 3 blocks, and 44 fantasy points per game, which is 4 points above her average. This is all against Seattle in those 3 games. So Brittany Griner with those numbers is definitely someone you should consider. And if you're not going to go on with her, you got to definitely take Brianna Stewart. She's at 8,100, and Miss Stewart at 8,100, you need pretty much 40. And she has she only need pretty much 40 or 41, and she's averaging 42. So this number here, this price, is actually a steal. I mean, she should be at 82, 8,300 if that is the case for her fantasy points per game total. So I mean, she's definitely at a little bit of a discount here, and that is not too bad. Her numbers are not bigger than Griner's in the 3 matchups, but we know that she is capable. But she has 50-point upside. All right, 2 out of her last 3, as you can see, 50 or better. Versus Phoenix, she's only put up a 30 spot in 27 minutes. She put up a 28 in 34 minutes, and she put up a 54 spot in Game 1 in 35 minutes. So she's capable of getting 50 against this team. Again, the first game and the second game were within the first week and a half of the season. During the course of the last 3 games, she's averaging 75% field goal percentage and 83% from 3. With 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and 5 blocks per game. That is nuts. 39 fantasy points per game. That is 3 below her average, but not that far down. Her splits at home are pretty good. She's 52% from the floor and 41% from 3, which is excellent. 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 blocks per game, and 1.3 steals. Averaging 42.5 fantasy points per game. That is about her average. Versus Phoenix, 41% field goal percentage is okay. Not too good with the 3-point shooting, 25% on the nose. So she's definitely missed a lot of shots from 3. All right, but she is shooting 91% from the free throw line, so don't foul her and put on the line. She's pretty good there. 11 rebounds per game. So even though she didn't shoot well from three, she shot fairly well from the floor in those matchups against Phoenix, but she also did very well rebounding. 11 rebounds a game, 1.5 blocks, 1 steal a game, and averaging 38 fantasy points per game. That is not too bad. That's just slightly below our average by about 3 or 4 points, but very, very effective. So again, she is someone to consider. Grinders numbers are a tad bit better, but either one of these girls, you would not go wrong. And I can see also anyone pairing up the two. You can stack these two girls if you're going to stack this game, and I think you'll still be able to get enough out of it. Natasha Howard in play as well, 7,300. 6 out of her last 8 games, she's at 30 plus. She can get you 40 or better. Versus Phoenix, she did put up a 43 spot in the last game, so that's enough for me to take a look at her. She did put 17 in 23 minutes in game 2 and 29 in 22 minutes in game 1. That's more than 1 fantasy point per minute. You know how much we love that here at DFS Zone. Her splits at home, 55% field goal percentage, shooting pretty poor from 3, 28% on the nose from 3, 76% from the free throw line with 6 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, and 1.5 steals per game. She's definitely a great defender. We know that if she steals and she blocks ball, she's going to bring us a lot of fantasy points. So averaging 29 fantasy points per game in her home games this year. Versus Phoenix, 52% from the floor, 93% from the free throw line with 6 rebounds, 3 blocks on average, and 28.5 fantasy points per game, which is pretty much just slightly below our average of 30, as you can see here, but not too bad against Phoenix. So Natasha Howard in play. Other than that, when I come down a little lower, Crystal Langhorne may be someone to consider as a value play, 4,200. You need about 21 from her. She's averaging 9, but she's done well in the last 2 games. This is, again, on the game where they didn't need anybody to really play as far as the stud or the star players. So they let some girls come off the bench and play more minutes. But we're not going to base that 21 minutes, even though she was very, very effective. 24 fantasy points in 21 minutes is not too bad at all in just getting some time on the floor. If she gets some minutes, she can definitely, we already see that she can get us at least 20. She can get us value. Against Phoenix, she did play 15 minutes in the last game on July 31st, put up 9. And then in the prior game, she played 15 minutes in game 2, only really had 5 fantasy points, which is really not that good. But what leads me to believe that maybe she's a good player is that in the last 2 games, she's shooting 52% from the floor with 5 rebounds, 1 steal, and 20 fantasy points, as you can see that. And at the same time, her home splits are pretty good. She shoots very well from the floor. At home, 56% from the floor, 89% from the free throw line with 11 fantasy points per game. So, I mean, definitely someone you should consider there as a possible value play. So that's Miss Langhorne. Other than that, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for me. I don't see anybody else that I like. I think those are the best possible play for you guys. I mean, I'm sorry I sound choppy and sound tired, but I am. It is now almost 4 o'clock in the morning, New York time. I'm going to have very few hours of sleep because I have a lot of things planned today. Again, I appreciate you guys dropping a like on the video. It definitely helps the channel. It also keeps these videos going as well because it keeps me motivated and it keeps me wanting to try to keep helping every one of you guys out there. So please, for everyone that watches the video, if you feel that the content does help you, please give it a thumbs up. I appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, again, subscribe down below. I got a lot of things coming this way. I'm getting the NFL ready. I will be doing NBA as well. And yeah, man, it's just going to be a busy time here at DFS Zone. And I expect to continue to do everything I can to give you guys the best possible information, the best possible content, the best possible statistical data, and give you that much more of an opportunity to hopefully cash on a regular basis. And that's the whole purpose of the whole channel, is to help those, and of course myself, to be able to do better on a daily basis with fantasy sports. And that's basically it, man. So I wish you guys a lot of luck in these games. I will be back with a live show and another video on Tuesday. Again, I apologize that the video is choppy. I am tired. I probably didn't cover everything that I normally cover, but I did the best I could under the circumstances this late and being this tired. But nonetheless, I will be back on Tuesday again with another video and a live show with a lot more spirit and obviously a lot more energy. So with that being said, Your boy Manny is out.